Go. Right. You guys ready?
Yeah, I might, you guys need me for.
Oh, then we don't need them for the 5
I
o'clock?
think he's gonna jump in for the.
6 o'clock?
Yeah.
Cool, okay, great. So I'd like to call to order the March 31st, 2026 regular meeting of the South Burlington School Board. The first item on the agenda is a proposed executive session. We are probably we'll talk about employment of a public officer, receive confidential attorney-client communication for the purpose of providing legal services to the board. And we'll probably hear an update about labor negotiations. I don't think we'll hear about real estate. So I would entertain a motion to find that premature public knowledge of the topics we're going to discuss tonight would put the district at a significant disadvantage.
Although,
Michelle moves.
I'll second.
Laura seconds. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Okay. And I would entertain a motion to enter into executive session.
I'll move.
Michelle moves.
And I'll second.
Laura seconds. Any discussion? All those in favor? Okay, all right, we're in executive session. We're gonna be joined by Joe Clark, Superintendent, and Mick Letty, District Council. And we will be back around 6 p.m. I'd like to call the March 31st, 2026 regular meeting of the South Burlington School Board back into order. We just had an session where we talked about employment of a public officer or employee, received confidential attorney-client communication for the purpose of providing legal services to the board. We did not discuss labor negotiations or real estate, and we were joined by Mick Letty, District Council, and Joe Clark, Superintendent. So the first item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The next item on the agenda is announcements. Does the board have any announcements? Okay. The next item is to review and accept the agenda. So we will have public comment. And then we'll have the student representative report. Possibly flowing out of the student representative report, we'll discuss and possibly take action if necessary on recruiting a new student representative. Not sure we'll need action there. We'll see if we get there. Then the next thing is the ENDS policy consultant presentation. So this is a presentation from a consultant that the ENDS policy subcommittee has identified and is on the call and ready to give a short presentation to us. Then we also have another presentation from the auditor. And then we have a presentation from Common Roots Carol, who's with us here today. Then we have superintendent report. Then we have a general discussion of updating the ENDS policy. And so that would just be an opportunity to talk about the importance of community involvement. Then we have a communication social media guidelines discussion item. And then finally, well, not finally, we still have a consent agenda after that, but then we have action items to charge the Legislative Advocacy Committee if we decide to do that. And also, if we decide to, we can authorize the hiring of the Dance policy consultant. And then we have consent agenda. So are there any comments on the agenda? My one suggestion, I'm not sure, how long does the presentation of the audit usually take? Is that like a 5-minute thing or a 30-minute?
15.
15, okay. So I think all of our presentations are pretty much around the 15.
About
mark.
15.
Yeah, okay. So I don't have any amendments. Yeah. All right. Hearing no objection. We'll move on to the next part, comments from the public. So at South Burlington School District School Board, we have 3 opportunities for the public to comment. During this section, which is comments from the public, and you can talk about any subject. You don't have to be a resident, you don't have to identify yourself, it's pure free speech time. Before the board takes action on any action item, but only on the topic being action. So this would be during our action item section and during community forums. Community forums are the only time when we will actually respond to public comment. And we will only respond to the public comment that's on the topic that is mentioned for that community forum. You'll be given up to 3 minutes. Please don't violate anyone's privacy, and official complaints and grievances cannot be filed during public comment. So is there any public comment this evening?
There's nothing online.
All right, the next item on the agenda is the student representative report.
Thank you, Seamus. All South Burlington School District schools will be holding parent teacher student conferences this Thursday and Friday, April 2nd and 3rd. So families, please check your school's calendar to see your individual schedule for those days. They're all a little bit different.
Some students at the high school will be completing the SELA biliteracy test this Thursday and Friday. The SELA biliteracy is an award recognizing high school students who demonstrate proficiency in English and at least one other language. That can be like a native language or something taught in school. So good luck to all the students taking the exam. And then other students will also be taking the BT CAP exam at the high school this week. So good luck to all of them.
And on April 11th, from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. in the Gertrude Chamberlain School small parking lot, Chamberlain will be hosting something called a fun bike rodeo. It's going to be an opportunity for people to ride, play, learn about biking, also enjoy food trucks as well. There's also going to be other community tables there for fun activities. So all students and families in the district are welcome to go. And you can learn more about the event on the Chamberlain newsletter that they post weekly. It's on the school website. So that is what we have for our report.
Okay.
We've got stuff about street representatives. So.
Yes, okay, so do you just want to move into that? So does the board have any questions about the representative report, just the events that were just mentioned, or any other comments? Okay, so then the next item on the agenda is around recruiting a new student representative. And I just wanted, Jen mentioned to me, since she's not here right now, that she is willing to help with that if we need help on it.
Amazing. Okay, I thought we could start by just going over what me and Moment's timeline is gonna look like for you guys, just so you have an understanding of when some of the important dates are. So this coming Monday, the 6th, is when we're gonna post an announcement slideshow in the lobby and library, send out a link to the application over email, like just get the word out in general about the application. It'll be open to all sophomores or rising juniors. And then me and Moment will go into the social studies department and go into each social studies class within that grade and then talk to them as well. Just about what the role's like. We found last year that that's helpful because people see this like looming application. It's helpful to have like a student face telling you what it's actually about and what kind of change you can make. So
Then May 4th, the application will be due, and then Emily and I will meet with whichever board members are working with us to look over the applications. we'll select finalists and look at the interview questions and kind of finalize our rubric, probably be pretty similar to what we used last year. And then we'll just send out emails to everyone, set up times, and then the week of May 18th, we'll hold the interviews and probably decide the new representative that day. And after that, it will just be me with the new representative getting them up to date, and then June 3rd, right? Yeah, June 3rd will be their first board meeting.
Yeah, so they'll come on June 3rd, and I think that will mean June 3rd and June 17th, you guys will have me, Momen, and the new representative here. And my last meeting will be June 17th, which is that Wednesday after I graduate. And then you'll have Momen and the new person. So I know I mentioned last time that we like made sure we moved the process up in years past, because we have found that it's easier if the student comes on before the summer starts. So that's important to us, but we feel pretty good about the timeline and everything. What we need from you guys is to hopefully decide on the two of you that would want to be involved. And what that commitment would look like would be meeting with me and Momen once, just to go over the application materials, make sure you guys like the questions we're asking. And then we'll meet again to review those applications, decide on when interview times work for you, and then we just need you there for the interview. And that's about it. So not too much of a commitment, but we do have to do it during the school day. So students are there, so it would be during work hours. But yeah.
I'm happy to volunteer.
And I know Jen said she would as well. I would love to. My job's a little bit different this year, so taking time off during the school day is not as easy as it used to be. So I think if Alyssa wants to step in and, I still want to like be part of the student,
Yeah.
liaison situation that I got going, but I appreciate you guys, you and Jen.
Yeah.
It's super fun.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
It's really, really fun.
I'm happy.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
The kids are really inspiring, and it makes me happy to see how far kids have come since I was a teenager. Yeah, so smart, engaged.
I'd be happy to help out too if you need a third wheel. If you don't, I won't be insulted.
For sure.
Are there requirements of any kind for students to apply? It's all interest based.
Yeah, it's pretty much interest based. We kind of gauge out their level of interest and not just like people aren't doing just for like a line on a resume based on their application. And then I'm assuming last year it was pretty qualified candidates who interviewed.
Yeah. We try to like not have it be all like student council, like we try not to go to like the leadership clubs, just because we want to give everyone the opportunity to apply. It oftentimes is those leaders in our school that end up applying. The process too revolves around like, can you attend Wednesday board meetings regularly? Because like it's important that we're physically here. So yeah, so the questions kind of help weed out people who are like really interested in doing change. We'll have you look at them too.
Is there any other board comment or questions? So I think the answer is that Alyssa and Jen will be directly working with you, and then Emily and Michelle are available extra, but the primary people will be Jen and Alyssa.
Maybe we'll reach out to you too about reviewing the initial application questions. And that kind
Yeah,
of thing.
whatever I can put, just.
Thank you guys.
All right, so the next item on the agenda, is,
She was planning to join at 6:30, but I
Okay.
can, if you want her to join earlier than that, I can ping her and.
well, so I'm
otherwise,
thinking
because
what we
have
could do
other
is we could
topics.
swap,
Swap. Sorry.
yeah, we could swap in, is the. So John is on the call, so we're gonna do the audit now, we're gonna talk about the audit now. So,
Is that him with his
Yeah.
hand raised? Okay.
Okay, so is the board okay if we move that agenda? Okay, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna swap the ends policy consultant presentation and the audit. And so now we're gonna do the next item on the agenda is the presentation of fiscal year 2025 South Burlington School District Audit with John Boulay from RHR Smith and Company.
Oh, yeah, you have to let him in.
Yep.
Yeah, that's,
I'll need to promote them. You know, are they presenting something?
I think so.
Yeah, you can
Yeah.
definitely promote it.
And then they should get a message saying that they were part of marketing. Yeah. See, I'm so.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Perfect. Well, thanks for having me here today. Again, for the record, my name's John Boulay with RHR Smith and Company. I won't take up too much of your time today. I do have a short presentation here, and a little bit of background about myself. Went to school here in Vermont. Just got my master's degree in accounting. I've been the audit manager for South Burlington School District for about 3 years now, I believe. So I will share my screen and I'll try and keep it under 15 minutes or so. Okay, so can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Okay, so we are talking about FY25, which is, the period of time between July 1, 2024 through June 30, 2025. A short presentation here that goes over the opinion, touches on some of the major statements in the full audit report, about the general fund, and then more specifically about some of the enterprise funds. And then at the end, I will go over some of the comments on the management letter, which are some recommendations for improving internal controls. So this first slide here, sorry, someone say something? Yeah.
So my understanding of what we're doing here is basically hearing the auditor's opinion, which is like, an auditor might give you a 100-page report, but there's one part in the report where they say, this is my opinion about how the whole thing is. And so that's what we're hearing right now is the opinion, right?
Correct. Yep. So slide 3 here is our opinion. And if you're willing to hear some of the, additional information on some of the major statements, more specifically the general fund, school nutrition, schools out program, I'm willing to go into a little more depth. But yes, slide 3 will be the opinion. So this first slide, a couple of these first slides are just responsibilities. This slide relays the district's responsibilities. Slide 2 here are our responsibilities for the engagement. Slide 3, now this is the opinion right here. So this is an excerpt from the independent auditor's report, page 1 more specifically. This excerpt on the right here is the second paragraph, which provides our opinion. And in our opinion, we have provided the district with an unmodified opinion, which is the highest opinion a district can receive. So you can kind of see that here in this first sentence, present fairly, those are the 2 words we're really looking for. So, in summary, we did provide the district with an unmodified opinion.
I've also heard that refer, it's a clean opinion.
It is a clean opinion. Yes, the highest and cleanest opinion that a district can receive. Correct. Yep. This is a 3-year comparison of the general fund balance sheet. A couple notes on this page. This blue bar here is 2023, and you can see that these cash, total assets, and liabilities lines are much higher than the last couple of years. And that's just due to an outstanding short-term note payable of about $5 million that was not paid off as of June 30, 2023, but has been since. And then again in FY25, the year we audited, a fun little note is that your cash makes up about 70% of your total assets. So that just tells us that the district is very liquid. This is your fund balance. Basically tells us that 97% of your total general fund balance is unassigned, while the remaining 3% is non-spendable. Theoretically, I would say all of your fund balance in general fund is unassigned because that 3% non-spendable is related to prepaid expenses. So that money has pretty much already left the door. It's out the door already. Unlike any assigned or committed fund balance you can use in subsequent years, the non-spendable is, yep, we have prepaid insurance. We prepaid it in FY25. That expense will be incurred soon after. I'm thinking July 2025. So, that's money that's pretty much out the door. A different view on this fund balance, a 3-year comparison here. The major notes here, this committed fund balance in FY24, that is committed, or that was committed for the FY25 budget, and same goes for 23. These two committed fund balance lines were committed for the subsequent year budget. And then again, 97% of your fund balance is unassigned, this green column here, which I believe is being committed for capital projects in FY26, if it has not been done so already. So now we'll talk revenues. This is a budget to actual for the revenues. You can see this number bottom right here. You had under received by about 1.9 million. In the grand scheme of things, that's about 3%. So nothing really to turn heads about. And I think the major classification that was under received was intergovernmental revenues. On the flip side here, we can see the budget to actual for the expenditures. Again, another good thing down here, the 1.2 million, that just shows you were under budget by 1.2 million. And again, that's 2%. So again, nothing really to turn heads about. But something interesting to note, it was the third attempt at passing the budget. And that's what this 68 million is here. So changing up, we're not going to talk about the general fund anymore. We're going to talk more about the enterprise funds, or, what we like to call them business type funds. More specifically, the food service or child nutrition, and then the schools out program. So a couple notes on this slide here. You can see a decrease to assets and net position. So there was a total decrease in net position between the two funds of about 648,000, which is not indicative of both funds combined. While the schools out program has seen an increase in their fund balance year over year for the past 3 years, the food service, on the other hand, has seen a decline in their fund balance over the past 2 fiscal years. The FY25 decrease was mainly due to the higher food costs. The food costs were much higher in 25 than they were in 24. And another decrease you'll see if you're looking at the full audit report is that we had moved the fixed assets out of the food service fund in anticipation of it becoming a special revenue. So the reason we're moving it out of enterprise and into special revenue is just because the charges for services cannot sustain the expenditures in that fund. So instead of it being a separate quote unquote business type fund, it is going to now be considered a governmental fund. But again, we are not completely eliminating the fixed assets. We can see those in a separate statement. So we have a statement of net position on statement A of the full audit report. Those fixed assets will be shown there. Revenues for those two funds, really nothing major to note, although it does look like intergovernmental revenues increased a lot through the fiscal year. We just reclassified these charges for services into governmental here. And the total increase in revenue from year to year was about $103,000. The flip side, expenditures, 3-year comparison, nothing major to note here. Again, I just wanted to reiterate that the food costs have, greatly increased throughout the fiscal year, FY25. And lastly is the management letter, which offers recommendations for improving internal controls. There's a few comments here: cash receipts, cash disbursements, student activity accounts, and procurement. I'll touch on student activity accounts here quickly. Management, at the central office has already indicated that they have corrected this, and student activity accounts are now, in the fiscal or financial software, and internal controls are now being housed at the central office. And for the other 3, cash receipts, disbursements, and procurement, management has notified me that they are currently working on corrective action, and these should be implemented, if not in 26, in FY27. So that is all I had, and feel free to ask questions if you have any.
Board questions? My one, Jean Marie, Superintendent, do you think that the procurement issues are sorted at this point that were mentioned here?
I think Jean Marie can speak to that. I think, yeah.
Hi, Jean Marie Clark, Operations and Finance Director. Thank you, John. I appreciate your time and effort in explaining the audit to the team here. To your question, Seamus, I would say that we have come a really long way during this current academic and fiscal year and getting all of those protocols in place. Before July 1, actually the next coming weeks, my team will be completing an updated financial handbook with processes and procedures to really clearly outline that that's not been a fresh document in this district in quite some time. So we will get that in place and do some trainings with the big users at the beginning of the new fiscal year. So we've come a long way, made a lot of improvements. I think we still have a little bit of work to do, but I'm really proud of my team and the district in understanding and following those protocols.
Could you, if John or Jean Marie, or when I see April online there, I just want the part I want the board to be really clear about is the assets in food service, because this is going to become an item for the board in another meeting or so. Can we clarify that? Just, I want to make sure everybody's crystal on what's going on there.
Yeah, John, did you want to speak about that a little bit more?
Yeah, I can definitely. So food
Hold on
service
a
in years.
Could you switch
Yep.
to that slide?
Oh, you want me to go to it? Sure. So am I sharing again?
We can see
Yeah, you can present, put in present mode.
So when it comes to governmental versus enterprise funds, in years past, the food service fund has always been considered enterprise because the charges for services have been able to sustain the expenditures. In recent years, the expenditures have outweighed the revenues, and that only decreases the net position. So, when it comes to accounting and the presentation of it all, we will end up showing food service as a special revenue fund, which in hindsight is a governmental fund rather than an enterprise fund. So the accounting behind it, food service still has fixed assets. They're just going to be shown on a separate statement, meaning for enterprise funds, for example, if you're looking at the nitty gritty and the trial balance and every single, balance sheet and income statement account, enterprise funds need fixed asset accounts, while governmental funds do not need those trial balance accounts. That's why we kind of separate those two on two different statements. Statement A is the statement of net position, which includes your current assets and your non-current assets, and your non-current assets are going to be your fixed assets. While statement C is a balance sheet, which only includes your current assets. So it does not include any non-current assets. That's just a way for us or for, pretty much any accounting firm to present, an actual fund balance number at the end of the year. Meaning, you can have, say, $295,000 of net position in your food service, which is related solely to fixed assets, while the remaining is basically taking your net revenues and expenses. So actually showing that ending fund balance at year end. So kind of to conclude, those fixed assets will still remain food service fixed assets, but they will be shown a different way in the audit moving forward.
They were included in the same sheet in the past. So there's going to be a difference of approximately 300,000, John?
Correct. So if I can just quickly show you the audit here. This is the income statement or, change in net position for the food service, the school nutrition. Down here, these net position corrections, we removed the $295,000 of net position solely related to fixed assets and moved it to statement A, which is the governmental side of the audit report, I guess you could call it.
And is this somewhat related to how now everybody gets free lunch?
No,
No, that comes out of that.
yeah, that's different.
That's different.
We'll talk, I wanted John to go through this with you all this evening, and then at our next meeting, we're gonna talk about child nutrition funding and moving forward, how this change and correction is gonna impact their budget moving forward. But John has said a few times this evening, we do get a reimbursement from the federal government for our child nutrition program. However, you won't be surprised to learn that that reimbursement is less than the actual cost of goods, staffing and food, so forth. So that will impact our numbers.
So for the general layman, former English teacher, what I'm hearing is that the change in that position is about $300,000 less, but it's simply a matter of putting the $300,000 of assets in a different line. That
I would say yes and no. The reason I say that, yes, there is a decrease in net position due to the removal of fixed assets. But if you take the fixed assets out of it, you start the year with about $1 million in fund balance in food service. The current year expenditures outweighed the current year revenues by $524,000. So that's where you're seeing that large decrease in fund balance. So we started the year at 1 million, ending the year here at 514,000.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other board comment or question? All right, well, if you have any follow-up questions, please just go ahead and email Joe. So thank you very much
Thank
for your
you, John.
presentation.
Yep, of course. Thank you, everybody. Have a great night.
You too.
Take care.
So the next item on the agenda is the ends policy. So would you add Annie Davidson as a panelist?
Yes.
And so the context for this is that the ends policy committee, which is Michelle, Alyssa, and I, recommended that we involve a consultant to help us make sure that whatever ends policy we write is actionable, in line with current standards, all that stuff. So to be clear, we're going to hear a presentation from Annie Davidson, who is our recommended consultant. And but we would still, as a board, write the policy. It would be Annie's job to help with a lot of things that would lead to that. Michelle, Alyssa, do you want to present the situation anymore?
I think that tees it up well. I don't wanna take time away from Annie. It looks like Annie, you better from that.
She's there.
Son,
Oh, hello, everyone. I think
yeah,
We can see
everything
you.
is connecting. Good to see you too. It's a pleasure to be with you this evening. I will happily share a slide deck if we're ready for that.
Sure.
sure, you want,
Okay, great.
I could give a little bit of an introduction if, sorry, that completely went over me. Sorry about that, Annie.
No
I'll just
worries.
30 seconds. And so I did want to say, I've known Dr. Davidson for more than 20 years. I know her to be an absolute professional in the field, multi-talented, with pretty deep ties also to the Northeast. Her MA is from St. Mike's. Her EDD is from UVM. I believe we have some folks here that have gone through that same program. And she has spent the last probably decade or more working with states and districts as a consultant on similar types of projects, not all exactly the same. They all have a different flavor and aspect to them, but really heavy on policy, process, and research. And so what she's going to share is what we've been talking about in terms of how she can help us as an independent expert walk us through some processes that help us understand and draw information and feedback from the community in really specific and informal and formal targeted ways. And I will leave it at that. Oh, and fun fact, her daughter, I'm gonna share this. Her daughter is her school board rep in her local hometown too. With that, I will hand it over to you, Annie.
Well, thank you all again so much for inviting me to come and share a few thoughts with you as we discuss your ENDS policy. The South Burlington School District is actually familiar to me. As Michelle mentioned, I started my career in the classroom, and it really began as I worked through my program to get licensure to teach in the elementary level through St. Michael's College. I had taught for 1 year at a school in Maine that was private, and so I didn't need a license. So it was St. Michael's College that really gave me the support to do that after, at night during classes that I could work into my many other jobs. And during that period, I had a chance to visit many different schools, through the program. And so some of the South Burlington schools were on that list. And I ended up teaching at Barnes Elementary in the north end of Burlington for the beginning of my career. And that was very formative to me. And it was through working at Barnes and being a classroom teacher and deciding to complete my master's at St. Michael's that I stumbled into Jeanette Hartnett, who was a research teacher. She was at UVM. One thing led to another, and I found myself in the EDD program, pretty excited about being there and probably not being as clear about what I was going to do with myself with that degree. I just really enjoyed the research aspect, which led me to California. I ended up following a partner to California and worked with Michelle for a short period of time in an education publisher out there, and that's how we connected. So it's been a big journey. I have many friends at UVM still, and I just find it delightful to be in this situation to have both of these parts of my world come together. I did want to just take that moment to share a little bit about me because it is a sort of unusually interesting connection, but I do want to jump right into your needs because this is a public meeting and an important one. So I am aware at this point from having talked with Michelle and reviewing the district policy, guidance policy, as well as some of the other materials that are available online about your monitoring plans and some of the past discussion. And I understand that the ENDS policy, which is really a foundational guidance policy, was written in really over 10 years ago. And with that in mind and part of the context, I also understand that time brings lots of reasons why it's important to revisit your guidance policy. Certainly community values can change, economies are changing around us. Many other factors influence what schools should be doing to guide student opportunities and to provide the kinds of supports that we need to include all students. And so with that in mind, it's a very good idea to reevaluate and to consider revision or development of indeed new ENDS policy that aligns with community values, that also serve some important practical things for you. I understand very well, working in state government is another hat I've worn, that having policy that does not match well with what you can do creates all sorts of tensions and challenges when you're coming back to report on progress. So having policy that can be tracked, that is built around what is important to observe, and can provide monitoring approaches that will yield the kind of data that you need to make decisions will be critical. And so ultimately, my understanding of your need is that you would like to have some strong recommendations in which you can, with which you can put forward a revised ENDS policy by June of this year. And so with that, there are a couple of things to think about. My understanding is that you really would like this to be a process that aligns with best practice. The idea of ENDS policies comes out of Carver's work, and there are many school districts and other kinds of boards, public boards all over the country using this set of ideas. So being in alignment with best practice is a high priority, as well as making the policy really serve the desires of and engagement of South Burlington stakeholders. So having that opportunity to have the South Burlington community reflect back the priorities and needs that will need to be integrated into this policy will be important to you. And then from that, my understanding is that you really want to address this outdated nature of the current policy, that you need to have this strong link between action-oriented policy statements and the monitoring that you'll need to do over time. And so in that way, we really want to think about a policy that's measurable and actionable on top of engaging stakeholders. Please interrupt me anytime if anything I say is inconsistent with your understanding, or if anything I've said is unclear. So don't hesitate to flag me down if I need to stop.
Could I just raise a couple things that I think will help move forward with the discussion? So I think that we do want your review, not only recommendations on what should go into the policy through focus groups, but also we want feedback on the first draft of the ENDS policy itself. And the first draft won't actually be ready until like mid-July.
Sure.
So it does so the engagement would go through beyond June. That's one
Thank
thing.
you, Seamus. I appreciate that. That noted.
And then the other thing is, I think in terms of engagement of stakeholders, I think that there's a interest in going beyond school community and just in every access in which people can be different, socioeconomic status, race, age. We want to get a very intentionally broad set of stakeholders.
Again, thank you. Great. I appreciate that. And hope that by the end of our conversation today, we'll have at least enough to imagine what that sample might look like, what that group of stakeholders would be, that, as you say, goes beyond some of the maybe more superficial categories and really reaches out into the community to represent well and comprehensively.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. I hope I'll come back to this question of who to engage and how shortly. I wanted to give you these 3 process steps as kind of the major buckets of the process that I'd envision at this point. Again, we're in the beginning conversation of this, so I understand that there may be more to it or some things to clarify, but I wanted to organize our conversation around 3 major steps. The first one being an independent review, and that really would be our team reviewing the existing policies. And from that review, combined with really this conversation and the conversations I've already had with Michelle and with looking at documents online, to pull together a rationale for the new policies that supports you in your going out to the community to ask for their engagement, as well as to be prepared and feel on solid ground for anyone who might be who might be more contrarian and have a hard time imagining a change to these policies. So to really establish a strong rationale that is transparent and that we can work from. The second bucket would be the collection of qualitative data. And so this process there are some options for how to do this. We'll talk about a few of those in a minute. But the big picture is that we'll be employing focus group interviews. We'll be combining that with the transcripts and notes from the open forum meetings that I understand you plan to have and have already scheduled on this topic, and then also employ a community survey that will help in a more of a confirmatory way, but once we have generated some draft material for the recommendations, that we would do a survey that could be broader, engage more people across the community than within the focus groups, and we could use that as a way to confirm some of these major findings and find out or press on any unresolved questions. So in the collection of those data, we would then do an analysis and come forward to you with a report that presents the key findings and recommendations. Again, this provides you the basis for decision making. You would have the final say. And of course, because stakeholders have been involved, I know that you will take them very seriously and do your best to honor that input. And that said, you also are decision makers that see across many different categories of key topics that affect the school district and the enormous amount of resources that goes into it. And so with that, you do have decision-making power that can, if necessary, supersede the stakeholder input. And so with that, you would base your draft, and then we would be very happy to provide feedback on that draft before you finalize it or go forward to ratify it. Any questions or comments about the process in the big picture here?
Very
Here's
comprehensive.
looking okay so far. Here's another view of it. So just to start off with some very immediate expert review, get that stakeholder input, and this really would be the focus on the focus groups and the public forum activity survey, and then that synthesis and analysis of the findings with a report. So if I were you, and I would want to know why Annie Davidson and why my team and why our group, because as much as personal confidence and professional confidence is valuable, this is a transparent process, and you will want to have the best support that you can for the resources you can allocate. I think that I can stand on solid ground that our group, which is a small women-owned business here, and we are located in California. That said, I have a lot of family in the Upper Valley on both sides of the river, from White River Junction to Plainfield, and so we do come from far away, but we are close to New England in our hearts and in our experience, and so we bring a deep experience with school accountability across multiple states and communities and school districts, across multiple levels within education systems. And that experience allows us to have some flexibility and imagination for solving some of the problems that can come up when you have consensus, or when you're working to build consensus across groups and to guide successful school accountability policy. We also have, our group has knowledge of best practice. We work in the public sector, primarily in the public sector. We are, even when we do work for private companies, they are serving the public sector. So the basic foundational assumptions that best practices are those that are documented usually by professional or associations and organizations that protect the public. We would be paying close attention to the assessment standards, practices, as well as policy analysis practices, program evaluation, etc. We also have been working with school accountability frameworks as Michelle mentioned, for over 20 years. I'm going to introduce my team. I'm going to show you some pictures of my team in a minute. But collectively, we have been working on school accountability frameworks, the technical requirements, the practical implementation for a combined 50 years. We also have deep understanding of assessment. I often work on psychometric problems and just the technical and design elements of assessments. I have a particular interest and commitment to fairness in testing, and currently I'm working on a couple of different projects in that area, and I'm more than happy to tell you more about that at any time. But I would say that commitment is deeply and firmly rooted in my experience at UVM. Working with Susan Azazi and Katie Shepard, they were very, very important people to me in framing my professional perspective and my commitment to fairness, inclusion, and making sure that our assessments and accountability systems serve all students. And probably most significant to all of you is that our team has deep experience in mixed methods research. We do it all the time. Our projects range from highly analytic quantitative studies where we're looking at or we're using large data sets and statistical assumptions to come to conclusions using whatever kind of statistical methods we need to, from factor analysis to various theories that guide assessment analysis, etc., including item response theory and so forth, all the way to qualitative research paradigms where we are using purposive samples, where we're developing focus group protocols, we're developing other kinds of interview protocols. We do a lot of survey work. And so this is the kind of work that we just love doing and we do a lot of. So with that, I'm going to just introduce the two other team members that would be part of this, that will be supporting this project. Jess Drizzen is our research manager, and she has been working for many years in the mostly tech field doing user experience research. And she and I teamed up last year. She's just an incredible person, incredible researcher. She cares deeply about getting to the truth of people's perspectives, and she's gifted at trust building and building the protocols and survey instruments that we use. She's a wonderful human being. And then our data and analysis expert statistician, Christina Elongakun, is also really wonderful. I don't know that she will be highly involved in this project, but she would be certainly in the background helping us keep track of data and doing checking our work. So what we've put forward in a short proposal to you involves the three of us supporting you, but I wanted to share just a little bit about, again, my background. I do hold an EDD from UVM. My experience has ranged from program evaluation, policy development and analysis, accountability, and assessment. I do have classroom experience. I have taught in higher ed. I continue to teach in higher ed in our community college. And my background it ranges in various aspects of education. But most of all, I really care about supporting all students. So I can tell from talking to Michelle that you do too. And I want to come back to the question that Seamus brought up about the sample. I do think that the way that this project unfolds will very much depend on how much fidelity we can, as a group, muster to pull together a strong group, a sample of South Burlingtonians to come together and put their ideas and their values on the table for schools and for students. And so with that in mind, I think there are a number of strategies that we can use together. And I think there are some of the design options of this really depends on who does what. So this third bullet here of the degree of involvement with recruitment, I think this will have to be a collaboration without a doubt. However, there could be we could take on more of the routine communication, or we could take on less of that. So that's something there. I think this is one of the areas where if the school board would like to be more involved with finding this sample, we could really focus on laying out the specification, so to speak, or laying out that sampling plan. Who are the key stakeholder groups? How are we going to reach out to them? What will we use to engage them and provide them incentive to participate? How will they be treated as we go through this process, et cetera? So I think that we can talk about roles and responsibilities within that recruitment process. And we're very happy to put forward some guidelines on sampling and who the types of people, the categories of people, and then you can help us with the actual contacts and invitations. So we can come back to that conversation about the focus group interviews, but I did want to outline just some of the ways that this could go within the resources that you have budgeted for this. We are in a day and age where many wonderful meetings happen virtually, as this one is. So we can leverage virtual meetings to keep costs down. That said, in-person meetings do have great value in this kind of work. So we may want to do some kind of combination of in-person and virtual meetings, but I did share a couple of different options for how we could think about this depending on what you'd like to prioritize for the funds. Another place that the design could vary could be in the total number of focus groups. So if it is more important to you to have more people involved in the focus groups, we can have more interviews. As you know, a focus group interview is a tradition that really comes out of market research, but the idea is that we pull together a diverse group of people, but with a common set of questions, and we interview them as a group. And because focus groups it's important to hear from everyone. It's therefore important that they don't get too big. Once you have a focus group get too big, it's difficult for everyone to speak up, and usually a few voices dominate. So it's nice to have a focus group be a manageable size, 4 to 6 people usually. And so if it's valuable to you to engage more people, we could have more interviews. If, however, it's more important that we have a very deep dive with a fewer interviews, that would also work. So there is some variability that's available there. I mentioned the degree of involvement with recruiting. Again, I really see this as, would you like us to do the communication piece with people, or would you like us to just give you the requirements and let you do that? So I think that conversation could really vary just in how much do you want us talking directly with those participants. And then the last option here kind of relates to the first. If it's a priority to have maybe Jess and me or just me come out and be in person, I am always more than happy to come up to the Northeast. I will tell you what. That said, it is cost, and I don't make any presumptions there. So I think those are the major factors I see that would impact the cost of our support. Otherwise, I think this is a discrete time frame. Within a couple of months, we want to have some strong recommendations. It'll go pretty quickly. I know that you have some community forum meetings set up that will also feed into this set of steps, and those would be happening in the next couple of months. So I know that we really should have all data by really close to the beginning of June, if not earlier. So with that said, I will now stop talking and look forward to any questions or anything that you would like to share with me.
Would there be comments or questions from the board? We have a discussion item on this later in the agenda. So.
That's great.
Excellent.
Any questions?
Yeah, this is great. Thank you for all this information. And we'll talk more about whether these design options are something that, like, you know, the committee, like Michelle, is going to kind of spearhead, or if we're going to talk about it all together and make those kinds of decisions together. And it's excited about this.
That sounds great. And I didn't mention, but I do know that there are some copies of a more detailed proposal document that I shared with Michelle, and I know she shared with others at the table today, that has much more detail on all this. So if you're wondering about the specific costs, or if you're looking at what our understandings are about timelines, and feel free to follow up an email or be in touch if you have any other questions.
Great. Well, thank you for doing the presentation, and yeah, we'll be in touch.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
All right. The next item on the agenda is a presentation about common roots. Carol.
I'm gonna start with a little story before I say anything, because that's a lot of information, which is exciting. And I'd love to hear down the road how you're gonna gather focus groups, because being in the community a fair amount, I think it's very diverse and very exciting to capture as much as you can with our communities and neighborhoods. But the story I want to share with you is a father of a first grader comes by the Wheeler house where my office is on a Saturday morning, and he saw my vehicle, he knows who I am, and so he knocks on my door, and I'm not usually thinking of people knocking on my door on Saturday. So, Ms. Carol, I have to tell you the story. Because my first grade daughter was at the breakfast table with me recently, and I was trying to introduce her to avocado toast. And so he says, I'm making her the toast, I'm cutting in small pieces, and she goes to me, now, Daddy, am I gonna like the way this tickles my taste buds? And he goes, tickles your taste buds? She goes, yeah, that's what we do in farm to school. I'm like, okay. So he thought I had to know that, so I thought I'd share that. But kids are so impressionable, and tasting and testing is really an important part of becoming aware of how we nourish ourselves. So thank you. It's been a while. I used to come every year, like 15 minutes to the school board meetings to just give an update. And it's been a while, so I won't take long, but I wanted to just make sure I make time of a new opportunity for our middle and high schoolers. So in the early days of 18 years ago, farm to school would have been our largest budget. We're in all your classrooms every month. Kids leave the 5th grade with about 50 plus lessons with common roots, and they're not on your school budget, so we raise money. And but now our largest budget is actually our farm stand food shelf. So I'm pleased to say that between our talented farm team, our chefs, and our food educators, we're at the food shelf with a lesson May through October. And then we bring food year-round, meals in particular that are very nutritious and engaging. And I love what Peter said in the newsletter. He sends notes every Saturday after the food truck closes at noon to a large group of people. And he said, and people are taking longer and longer at this common room table because there's so many options and there's so much good food. So we're really pleased to do that. That's our mission. Food education, food equity, and organic farming. In our farm to school, I had a wonderful conversation with Rhonda, and actually Common Roots we had 3 members at the table when we hired Rhonda. This is way back 10+ years ago. Your food program was $357,000 in debt and growing. And there was a change. And then the school board knew that we were serious about the impact of helping our children learn nutrition before they leave our high school. And with that, Rhonda, we had an opportunity to be in the process, and Rhonda is a very hardworking woman. And after COVID, she had no one to cut your vegetables and make those stir fries. And she was like beside herself, and she's getting her equilibrium and buying more local food from farmers. I forget which percent of her budget. I think it's around 20. And now we're talking about working with our food educators in the classroom to do more bridging like we did in the early years. We had a big bridge between the 4th and 5th graders, helping the K1, 2, 3s learn about some new foods in the cafeteria. So we were in the classroom and the cafeteria in the earlier days, and just over time, and then with COVID, we got away from that. And so now we're moving back to that. But that's a very powerful opportunity for kids to try new foods and to like hear the language of nutrition and learn why something's good for them and what it does for their body, where it comes from, how it grows, the cultural aspects of some of our foods are important to teach as well. In the middle school, we have the Farm to Go program. So in the classrooms, we're at 180,000 lessons. And we round down at the end of every year because we never know how many kids were absent on any given day. But that's pretty interesting. And then the middle school, that's an after-school program. There's not a way right now that we've discerned that we could be with all the students in the middle school by the way their curriculum is mapped out in teams and how many specials and music and TA time. But we do have an after-school program where about 8 student chefs come together. It's a 5 or 6 week course, depending on how the school year vacations go. And they go home with a meal that they've made to their parents, a full balanced meal with the recipes and the meal for their family. My favorite story of 18 years is an 8th grade boy would bring a towel in his backpack the day he did Farm to Go. And when all the portions of their meal are in a box to carry, he would cover it with his towel. So his parents couldn't smell what the food smelled like until he set the table. It's an 8th grade boy. I'm like, oh my God, that's crazy. So his parents were like tickled that he was that intentional about serving it, right? That was kind of sweet. We're at 15,500 meals that middle schoolers have made for their families. We have gatherings on the land, that's farm hops, field trips, summer camps. We do the Abenaki Festival for Rural Landling Farm. So the gatherings on the land, we have a devoted half acre on our farm for the gatherings that we do. And then our internships, while they're mostly from college, especially St. Mike's, we have graduates from other culinary programs around the nation. We've had interestingly, a graduate student of, she was doing religious studies and wanted to be a pastor who pastored from a stewardship perspective of land. And when she learned that we were on the land and teaching kids and in the community with food equity, she spent her summer with us from Yale Divinity, and she did some very deep work with us around telling the story, which was very helpful. And so the internships are varied. We mostly in the high school have volunteers, and we just did a project with the Cape Club, thanks to Allie and Kate. And then we have your freshmen come to our farm in the Wheeler House during your community service days in the fall and the spring. So that's been a very important part of them getting to know their community. When they come to the Wheeler House, they say, well, we're gonna get some work done at your house. And they're like, our house? I'm like, yeah, this is your house, because it's obviously a city building. And so we get a ton of work done. My favorite thing that we did recently, a couple of years ago in one of the freshman service days, is they dug a very simple river in the back of the Wheeler House, like a pathway. And so when the kids are at camp or at Friday flatbreads, we turn the hose on in the morning. And by the time they come, there's water for them to float boats down or build bridges or ferry houses or splash and make mud. And so that was a really fun project. And the freshmen were so, I'm gonna say systematic about it. They wanted to know about the slope and would the water flow down. I'm like, well, that's good thinking, which I hadn't thought about. So it's kind of good. But the latest is really, part of the reason I asked Dr. Joe if I could come is we have a very unique opportunity in our district from a very old company called the Vermont Agency. And I met them, I was invited to be, which I don't golf, but I was invited to be at a golf tournament at the Burlington Country Club last August. And I met the mother of one of your sophomores, and she's a nutritionist by training. About 20 years in nutrition education and practice in LA and Park City, Utah. Was back in the area. She started off at Vermont Agency. But the Vermont Agency has expanded their understanding of what they want for children. Before Maria brought the concept of nutrition to the agency, they wanted to help young people in the middle and high school learn about financial literacy and have an account for college. And now they've expanded to, they want them to understand how do you nourish yourself, and how do you help them learn financial literacy, and how do you get them an account. So we're in our second pilot. Tomorrow night, 9 middle and high schoolers will come to the Wheeler House. We have the capacity in the future to do many more, but this is like, we had 6 in the first cohort, we have 9 in this cohort. It's a 5-week course. In order for the students to be eligible for the points that they're going to get towards college, they have to bring a parent, because a parent in middle and high school is still the one buying the groceries. And it's mindfulness. It's not a woo-woo, you got to do this, you can't do that. It's very inclusive, but it's teaching some very simple research principles of how do we keep our health strong. So what happens in this program is, and I had no idea when I set up to do a pilot how generous it was going to be. Every time a child in middle or high school finishes a five hours, if right now it's at the Wheeler House, it could be here, it could be in an auditorium, it could be places where we can serve a lot more kids. They get 2,000 points towards college in an account through Vermont Agency, and their parents get 2,000 points. It's worth $4,000 in a college account. There are 450 colleges. Some of them are 4 years, some are 2-year, some of them are technical programs. And if they decide to go to a college that's not on the 450 that they have relationship with, they can give them to anyone on either side of their family. And if no one uses them, they can go into their estate. Is that crazy? So, you know, I'm gonna stay with this, and we have some mothers and fathers, of the sport clubs, the teams, and they're saying like, you know, we can't come at 4 o'clock, they're all in sports, so we're gonna look at a way to figure this out, either at the Vermont Agency or in the school at a time when, sports people could come, because, what was her name? Jamie, Kelly. Jamie Kelly goes, you know, I want Sam to learn about nutrition. I'm like, he's a great athlete, but he's like, he's eating crappy. And it doesn't fit. And she goes, but it's, so we're gonna work out a time for the sports kids. So it's very small right now. 6 and 8 is only, or 9 is only 15 kids starting, but it's, the pilot makes sense, and then it gets crazier. Every birthday, they get 500 points in their account. So you have a sophomore at your high school who has $19,000 in her account for Vermont Agency. And it 1 point is $1. So if you have 19,000 points, which she has $19,000 to his college. So I don't know where this is going. I'm just making you aware that you might hear about kids earning college dollars with Common Roots and Vermont Agency, but I met with the owner of Vermont Agency and the nutritionist yesterday. And I think we can do something special. I don't know how we work with this, with the social workers and the guidance counselors to really work with kids, families who might be struggling financially, but this shouldn't just be for whoever hears about it. I think if we have a chance to get dollars in the account for kids, we want to get it cost effective the best we can. So wasn't our focus in the pilot, but we are going to be looking at that as we go down the road. So any questions, comments?
That's amazing. I was looking at the little pamphlet that you gave to us, and I know about Friday pizza night. And there's also meals on Tuesdays at the.
Yes, every Tuesday. Tonight it was a chicken curry. Our chef is a 30-year licensed executive chef. He left the Essex Resort when his son in our schools in 8th grade said, "I never see you anymore, Dad." And so he knew that we had a chef in teaching, and in the Wheeler House Kitchen. That's a part of our revenue to do this work and sell these meals. Again, it's not all philanthropy. It's making fundraisers that bring the revenue to pay for your educators. So he's a very talented chef of 30+ years, and he left the Essex, and he didn't know we had an opening, but our chef from Southern New Hampshire was going back to school at 29 to learn coding. So it worked beautiful. Wow. Oh, that's a great, any other questions? So I gave you the Nourish brochure. We would love to have 400 or 200 members this year in our Nourish Card program. What happens is you buy your meals at the Wheeler House. You can spend them at the Flatbread Fridays. We have Comfort Food Fridays in the winter. And then we also have the farm stand open from May 1st till early November. The secret of we're the only farms in your city, folks. So, I mean, that's crazy, but we are the only farms that are, but the secret of our farms, because of some people in our city along the way being conservationists for agriculture and for open space. I think there's a balance there. We are on 280 acres where no one's allowed to use chemicals. So we're only cultivating 18 acres. We cultivate 14 at the farm at South Village, but that's 220 acres, including the preserve, where no one's allowed to use chemicals. And then at your Wheeler Park, which is Hubbard Park, that's 67 acres, and we use 4 of that, and there's no chemicals there. So we have 2 organic certifications. NOFA just means we don't use chemicals, but we have a higher level. It's the highest in the nation. It's called the Real Organic Project. And so you have to remineralize your soil, rotate, low tillage, and leaf pollination. And the key of our nutrient density in our food is that every time our farmer, now back a quick here, hallelujah, He's amazing. I did four years with him solid in 0 issues. He's smart, he can fix anything. His seasonals are all coming back, so that's a great, it's a great, foundation for the future. And, you can't say that your organic food is anything more than no chemicals, but when you're putting nutrients back in the soil, the compost and the cover cropping, if he's done with his cabbage, he's gonna test that soil and he'll know exactly what cover crop to bring the iron, the copper, the manganese back into the soil. So you have to come and see us, at least see our farm stand and taste our food. And over time, we have a purchase and sale agreement. We hope to buy the only commercial lot on Sphere at the light at the farm, because the smart man who thought of building a village around the farm said to the city 20+ years ago, that farm someday will need an outlet, and we have a purchase and sale agreement for in the future to build a farm market where access for families and education, which is our mission, are at the center. So stay tuned. I think we can do it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Come see us.
So at this point, the board's been going for 2.5 hours. Do we want to take a quick break before the superintendent report? Yeah. Right, okay, so we'll take like a 5-minute break. We'll come back to the super.
About y'all.
Just gonna wait till 7:30. Sure. All right, we'll get started with the next agenda item, the superintendent report. So Joe.
Yeah, I just have two short items today. One is regarding the early separation program, the ESP, the buyout, the early retirement, whatever folks have been calling it. It's the early separation program. It's a reminder that the election window closes this Friday, April 3rd. And after the election window closes, participants then have a 7-day revocation period through Thursday, April 10th. After April 10th, elections become irrevocable. EPC has indicated that they can prepare an estimated post-plan summary the week of April 13th, which will align with the board's April 15th meeting as a decision point. So at this point, at the most recent report, which I received yesterday, 21 employees have turned in their paperwork opting into the ESP. 11 of those are teachers, 6 of those are classified staff, and 4 are administrators. What the board will need to decide on April 15th, after you consider the post-plan summary, which is the projected savings and assumptions, you will need to decide whether this is a go or a no-go on whether to proceed with the implementation of the program based on the final election results. So again, early that week, I hope by the 13th, I'll be able to get you their projections of the savings. And then on the 15th, the board needs to make a decision whether we can move forward. Second, I wrote in the board update last.
Before we move on, Joe, did the board have any questions about the early separation?
You said it would close and then there was another period where they could change their minds. Is that opting out of their choice or opting in or both?
Opting out only. Yeah, they have to sign up to join by this Friday the 3rd, and then they have 7 days to back it.
Right.
Good question. Okay, thank you. So last Friday's board update, I talked about the school foundation. The school foundation they've done great things for the district. They've been relatively, well, in my time here, which is short, it's been relatively dormant. And Patrick Burke and Joanne Abate are the folks that Joanne is the CEO of the organization. Patrick Burke is the president. And with Patrick planning to retire, and Joanne, we're taking her off district payroll, so she'll be going on to the payroll of the foundation. And my history in school districts is working with really robust foundations. And so the hope is to get our foundation up and running really strongly again. School foundations, they're 501c3s, they're not affiliated with the school, they're not a branch of the school, they're a separate 501c3. But the goal is to do things that are great for kids and staff members here. So, and also, they were instrumental in building the athletic complex. But typically what a school foundation will do is annually give out lots of scholarships to graduating seniors and also give mini grants to teachers who want to do something unique or innovative in their classroom. And so, with Patrick leaving, with me coming on, we are looking to recruit new members to be on the board, to get it up so we're having regular meetings again and doing fundraisers and being visible in the community. I'm really excited to say this. I publicized this yesterday, Monday. I sent out something on Front Porch Forum, and I put it on our Facebook, and I sent it in a parent broadcast. And at this point, 16 people have expressed an interest in maybe being on the foundation. Now, of course, we don't even know what that looks like yet. So right now we're collecting names, and then I'll get with Pat and Joanne, and we will reach out to all these folks to kind of tell them, what does it look like? What is the commitment? And what do we hope to do? And really really impressed with the folks that are who are expressing interest. I have a financial background. I have a background doing fundraising. I have a background in law. All of them, you know, I've not all of them, but most of them. I have kids in the district, or I'm a graduate. I want to give back. So it's really, really impressive. And I mentioned in the update, I would love for a board member or two to be liaisons to the group, so you can kind of report back. I think I'm really excited about the prospect of having a really healthy and robust school foundation. And so that is all for my report. Any questions?
No, that's exciting. I've done, participated in the George Cannon walk run a couple times that the foundation has been helpful to put on. So I'm excited to see them do other things, and I'm really encouraged by the people who've already reached out with interest after one day. So.
Yeah, I am too. I'm shocked, to be honest with you. So it's great. It's great. No, you can't get 16 people to run for school board.
Oh, yeah. Great.
Yeah.
Any other questions for the superintendent? Next item on the agenda is a general discussion of updating the ends policy and the importance of community involvement, since they are the owners of the organization. So in this discussion, we're not actually going to talk about the consultant. That's another action item we have later tonight, but we just want to talk a little bit in general again about the plan for the ends policy update. I'm gonna share my screen.
Seamus, can I just ask, is this underlined because it's a link or because it's really important? Yeah. Oh.
I underlined it because it was really important because the feedback that we've gotten from past board members is that updating the ends policy is a major once in 10 years kind of thing, and so we just want to
Gotcha.
have it.
I just was wondering if it linked that. It is really.
It's not linked in the thing.
Very important.
Okay, so I wanted to have everybody look at this calendar again. So again, the purpose of this is that we have a first draft of a new ends policy on July 8th. And in order to get there, we want to have as much time while teachers are in schools and so that we can just get during the school year as much feedback as possible from the whole community. So we are planning on having let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4 community forums. The first one would actually be April 15th, then again on May 6th, then again on May 20th, then again on June 3rd. And so there are a lot of dates on here that are important for us to try to bring people to. And something we heard earlier today in terms of focus groups and how we could help to recruit people into that. At the same time that we're going to be running these community forums over the next couple months, we're also hopefully going to be running focus groups. And so for both of those, we're going to need board involvement in recruiting community members to come out and tell us what is important to them. And I think we all represent different groups. We all, you know, represent different neighborhoods. And so it's important to really think about how we can get the maximum representation. So looking at this calendar, does anybody have any further thoughts on just the dates that are necessary to hit this?
I just have a question. We put out something in the other paper to inform them. Is that correct?
Yes, and I got it in the mail. Or no, I didn't get it in the mail, but I did find it at a gas station. Yeah, I saw it in the gas station.
Oh, yeah, I saw it on, it's in there. It's in there.
Yeah,
I saw it.
I just forgot to leave. Yes, it's there.
Okay, so we did put out something.
You went into the gap.
We are working on that. That first heads up.
We can do front porch forum too. I don't know if you, I have the refreshes tomorrow, so I have 4 more posts tomorrow, whatever. Get work out.
I think that's a really good.
Yeah, I also. Yeah, like having the schedule, I think. would be good, because that is a concrete follow-up to the heads up, hey, we're gonna be doing this in this general timeframe. And then this is, look for these dates, we hope you can make at least one kind of.
Yeah. So is there any other board comment on the ends policy update? Things that you want to make sure that we take into account? This is just a space for us to talk about it as a group.
Do we wanna have any sense from the board before moving on to the, like actual action of identifying consultants, defining the scope of work and all of that about, so Annie talked about 4 to 6 in a focus group being kind of the max that you want, because you get the more rich discussions that way, and then we could talk about how they're comprised, right? Do we have focus groups that are just one group, a mix of groups? We need to pay attention to like power differentials, like maybe we wouldn't want leadership and faculty in the same meeting. I don't know that that's true, but just the things that we need to attend to. So I'm curious if there's a sense of like how many, right, to guide that part of the conversation. Because 3 with a max of 6 is 18 people, that might not be enough. 5 is probably better.
My sense, just looking at the, and clearly, we don't have to go with the consultant that was recommended to us initially. I think that's the most expeditious thing to do, but if most consultants would probably propose something similar, they just say, well, how many focus groups do you want to do? And do you want me to do them in person? And I, based on the prices in the proposal that was sent out, my inclination is that since this is something we seem to do once every 5 or 10 years, having 5 focus groups or more, doing them in person, the only thing I can compare it to is the superintendent search process, which was run by a consultant who was here in person. We had lots of really good meetings. So I would be on the end of more focus groups and doing them in person.
Can I ask, are the community forums the focus groups?
No.
Okay.
Great clarifying question. So the community forums, that's just what we run ourselves.
Yeah.
And again, like I'm personally committed to trying to get people here who I feel like talk about school, but don't come to these meetings. And I want them to come and represent themselves here. But then the focus groups are where we might kind of like get advice that, we should be representing different age groups and different socioeconomic groups and then we'll kind of like, as I understand it, build the focus groups until they reach that level of representation, and only then kind of move forward with them.
Right, and a good distinction, I think, is the forums are more informal, where the focus groups are more intentional and focused on getting a fuller representation than would get in just that kind of convenience of people who want to come, right?
Yeah.
Like, I feel like this is gonna be a little bit of calling friends of friends and trying to entice a really diverse group of people as best we can do. We always say those words, right? And we rarely achieve the kind of diversity that we want on these committees or groups. But the forums are the informal, so people can come, they can tell us what they,
And say anything.
yeah, exactly. They can tell us what they want. We can bring questions to those, to kind of prompt some conversation if we think that would be good. But the focus groups are really, they're also more centered on the ideas of ends policies themselves, right? And, probably a little more focused on, what's actionable, measurable, what can be implemented versus what is aspirational. Those conversations will be really structured and deep. That's the intention anyway. That's the hope that it would achieve that.
Yeah, thank you. I wasn't sure about, so the focus groups are not on this calendar right now, are they?
They're not scheduled yet,
Okay.
but what did we say, April, May?
We just marked the one, so we're basically saying like, on the assumption that tonight we take action to approve the hiring of a consultant, then we would want to start recruiting now for those focus groups. You know, we'd have to wait a little bit to hear what we're supposed to recruit for. And then the focus groups themselves would probably be starting sometime in mid-May. Any other board comment or thought, Joe, anything on this?
I think you made a really good point that this is something you do every 10 years, so I think you do it right. You know what I mean? I don't go halfway with this. I think get as much feedback as you can, would be my recommendation.
Any thoughts? Okay. Great. All right, and we'll return to this topic towards the end of the meeting to possibly take action on whether we want to authorize the hiring of a principal consultant. The next item on the agenda is communication and social media guidelines, and Alyssa asked for it to be put on the agenda. So, right over to you.
That's very good on the agenda. The school board received 2 community emails within like the past few weeks about board members being on social media, so that's what brought it up. I was looking over the social media guidelines that are posted on the website, and then Joe also provided ones that I think were revised in 2020, but never actually like approved.
It sounds like.
That's what, yeah, that's what it sounds like.
Linus says there was discussion about them, but it never got to the approval stage.
Yeah. So yeah, as we're adopting things and revising things, this revision was adopted in May of 2018. So I think it would be helpful to take a look at it. So we have a social media policy, or we don't have a social media?
We do, from 2018.
We have guidelines. It's not, I don't know if it, I guess it's under policy. I don't know if it's an actual policy.
So I believe that we are largely not using like an official, like, you know, we used to have a board Facebook page. I believe that that has since been shut down. I know that Joe mentioned earlier that he posted something on Facebook, but that's the district page, right? But I do, you know, I do think the 20, maybe I should pull the actual adopted version. It's pretty good. In terms of, you know, reminding board members in terms of the code of conduct to make sure that what they say, they're not presenting the board's act, they're not basically single-handedly interpreting what the board is doing and then claiming that that's the board's perspective. But instead are always supposed to say that it's their point of view.
Yeah, so I guess to be completely candid, I fully agree that we as human beings and board members and community members have freedom of speech, and that we should use that freedom of speech. But those 2 emails, it seemed to be like there was some confusion on social media about sharing board emails to communicate your personal opinions or sharing different information that's not necessarily, I guess it's public, but it's not necessarily like out there. And the only reason that we're sharing, or that a board member is sharing it, is because of our position on the board. And so I think that it can get confusing to the community as to how you're speaking and what you're speaking about, basically. Or in what role you're speaking.
And
So that's my comment.
even if there is a communication of saying like, this is just my opinion, that's that maybe isn't always resonating with people.
I think that makes people confused, saying that like, this is my opinion, but then also. We still are holding a position of power. I still think that. People still look at us with a lens of holding a position of power, so I think that it can be confusing for community members.
People are crystal clear that this is their some people. And some people are still gonna associate it with the school board. And but the last thing you wanna do is like shut down anybody's right to express their personal opinion. It's just. I think, you know, the best thing to do is come up with the best, clearest policy. Make sure that if anybody is going to post anything on their social media, that they put whatever the disclaimer is. And if somebody makes a mistake, that's.
I will say one thing so. I think you started adding a disclaimer to your emails. And so. I copied that and put it into my emails. And I'm thinking that I will also put that in my social media posts. Just like a explicit, you know, I'm an individual school board member, I do not speak for the board. And I'll just try to put that at the bottom of all my posts. So I think that that's very wise. And if I could say what my position on this is, I don't know, does anybody else want to say what their position in general on social media is?
I personally just don't post very often on social media, especially about these kinds of topics. I think it's not I want to communicate with the public and the community, but I find that sometimes the conversations don't garner the kind of rich, cooperative, collaborative communication that really is going to move us forward in any way. So while I see the importance to share my thoughts as a board member or just as a South Burlington resident, I also find that the communication, the conversation can devolve and it just doesn't feel as purposeful as I'd like it to. So I don't have much of a presence on social media, and I think other people have the choice to do it or not do it. And as long as they're saying you know, this is my express opinion, obviously I would never chill, you know, freedom of speech. And, but I just would hope that some of the communications I've read some of the pages, and I've read how people communicate with each other, and it can be a little bit disheartening. And that's another reason why I don't really get involved, because I think it's a lot easier to say things on your computer than it is when you're having them face to face. And as soon as we all got in the room together, I feel like it would be so much different. And those people who would say things they'd think twice, and I'd think twice before I type the thing and then delete it instead of hitting send. So I just, I'd love more in-person communication and some other way, but you know, right now social media is a great way to reach a whole bunch of people and try to get that conversation going. It just lacks the interaction that I think would be more meaningful. So that's just what I'm saying.
I totally agree. Like it takes very few degrees of separation from the actual post. So you get to the point in the comments where people are just shouting at each other that for things that have nothing to do with the post or are only tangentially related to the post. At the same time, actually, I have a question. I just want to be clear on what we're talking about, because I've heard policy and I've heard guidelines.
This is marked as a guideline.
guidelines, right.
In the policy and procedure page, there is no, apparently it's not considered a policy. It's unclear. It's just a guideline. Yeah.
And I guess another question I have, and we don't have to answer this here, but something that personally, I'm thinking there's no need for this, right? We're all adults. We understand our role as board members. We understand that the things we say have consequences, and as long as we're all willing to accept those consequences, that there's probably nothing we would say on social media that isn't covered in some way by our code of conduct, right? Like we're bound to those core ethics. And we're responsible, you know, even if we can't predict the consequences, we're still responsible for those consequences individually, not as a board. And I don't want to tell anybody, you can't say what you want to say. I think we should all have the freedom to say that. There are certain things that we're bound by other agreements, confidentiality and otherwise, that we can't say. We can't talk about personally identifiable information. We can't share embargoed information, like when test results come out. If we, I mean, we don't even get those, but say we did, we would be bound to not share those things. So I'm not seeing any really compelling reason to put more regulation on the board that isn't already substantially covered by the expectation that we behave as professionals under our own code of conduct. However, if we do want to, there is one line in here that I think is inappropriate altogether, which is, if I can find it, post only content that the district has already released to the public. I would agree to something like post only non-embargoed, and any embargo has to have a clear rationale. But I wouldn't want to be in a position where the board only is able to act in any way or speak in any way at the approval of the district. Right, I think it needs to be the other way around.
I don't disagree. But that's talking specifically about posting on the school board Facebook page.
Posting on the district site, got it.
Yeah.
I don't have access.
That's
to that.
number 2. Number 6 says post only content that the district has already released to the public. That is not clear whether that is the district's site.
Well, well, 6 is the one I was talking
Oh,
about.
okay.
Post only content that the district has already released to the
I got you.
public.
Yes.
Ambiguous.
Yeah, number 2 is clear.
It's really,
school
it
page.
feels overly restrictive. I mean, obviously, I say that with the expectation that none of us is gonna do something stupid and release information that, you know, makes everybody's job hard, right? Like, the last thing I would ever want to do is do that, but I also don't want to tell people that, you know, the board, that they need district approval to post. I would expect that process looks like the district presents to the board the information that there's some process around what cannot be posted that is clear and compelling and agreed to by the board. Or law, or written in law, right?
And I could say the administration does not want to be the gatekeeper of what the board posts and doesn't post on social media.
That's also what I'm thinking, like,
Yes.
right, why would we have something like that?
We do want people, board members to be aware of the impact of things that are posted. And
Yep, absolutely.
are you going to say something?
Would you come up to the, sorry, otherwise people can't hear you.
Hi all, my name is Monica Dorpshires. I'm the director of DEI and SEL. And I just wanted to point out to the board a helpful resource that we've used in the past around, that's been released by the Vermont School Board Association, which is not a model policy, but is a social media reference guide for board members. So I'm happy to email that along to the school board. And it was written in line with the Vermont School Board Association Code of Ethics. So it's something. Not a policy, just I think it's in the law.
That's great, because I do want to, I wanted to circle back to the idea of like, I don't want to, you know,
Yeah,
say what people can or cannot post, but also I would like to address community concern as well. I don't want to just be like, well, who cares what they think? I mean, obviously there's some concern and some confusion, so I don't want to just say it here. What if we speak, it's just us, so move on, you know?
yeah, and I also want to make it very clear that I'm like, do not bring this up to like shut people down. I
No.
mean, 100%, like, I use my voice, I think that everyone should, you know, use their voice and say their speech, but I do think that there is some concern. I mean, I don't know, I think everyone got something else. I do think there is some concern, and then I was also looking into a Supreme Court case that. When there's blurred lines of like providing your school email or like speaking as a school board member one time, but then saying that this is my personal opinion another time, like. It's not all protected free speech, like that's a very, very blurred line that. When you start blurring those lines, like they cannot all be protected speech basically. So that's all that I wanted to bring up.
I'd love to see what Monica's gonna send to us. She's
Yeah.
smart and has the resources, and maybe we could review that and see how it compares with what we have, and if we want to borrow from it or talk about it more.
Well, I just wanted to put in a plug for Facebook, which is shocking, given the state of online discussion with Facebook, but I believe that especially post-COVID, it's one of the only places where you can find people from all ends of the political spectrum in the same space. And they do not treat each other well. And it takes a lot of it's hard. That's the worst part about posting anything on Facebook, is seeing how people react to each other and just being like, oh my God, just like you guys literally live 2 blocks away from each other. But I think that there is a process of getting used to talking to each other again that can happen if you kind of like just gut it out. And you know, there was actually a post fairly recently on Facebook by a community member who just was essentially saying, who's saying, I've seen some of the recent posts and the subsequent discussions, and I just hope that we can have some more positive discussions. He was basically not posting about any particular thing, just saying, I hope we can have some more positive discussions. And so I read the comments on that page, on that post, and there were people who had previously only just screamed at each other, and they were in the same space, commenting without ad hominem attacks. And I just thought that that was like a little ray of light. So I do view it as a place of more equitable representation than, for example, our school board meetings. And so for as much as it is painful to watch, for as much as there is some, you know, concern about being confusing, it's definitely worth the discussion. I'm glad you brought it up, Alyssa. And, you know, I'm looking forward to hearing what, you know, VSBA has to say about it. But it's something we should, I think, engage with very seriously as a way to talk to people.
I wonder if there's strategies for crafting your post in a way that would garner less, you know, combative communication. I'm just saying there might be strategies, there might be, you know, because you never know really how you come off in a post. You might think you sound in a certain way, but it sounds actually different. And you'll always have that. But I would be curious about learning strategies for putting facts out into the public and having them received in a way of that doesn't get people on the defense right away. But
right, and doing that in a way where you still come across as an authentic voice, as opposed to like an official spokesperson or like a, you know, yeah, that's threading the needle. Very important skill in the 21st century.
PR class.
Yeah. Yeah, but then the comments are gonna be, I must have taken that PR class.
How much are you paying the PR?
taxpayer.
Any other thoughts on? I'm sure we'll discuss this again, but any other thoughts?
If we go this route, I would just say I would be in favor of language that is the least restrictive possible and the most conscientious about interfering with district action, right? Which you can't predict that. Right back to my original point, we all each own the consequences of our own missteps, right? But I don't think that means we no longer have the chance to make that misstep.
Great, so the next item on the agenda is to charge a legislative advocacy committee. So unfortunately, Jen was gonna try to, she had an issue tonight and she was gonna try to make it, and I think she was one of the main advocates for this concept. I propose maybe we move this to a later agenda. Okay, all right. And then the next is authorize board chair to hire ends policy consultant. So this is an action item, but we can also discuss it. There's multiple options. We could say, don't hire anybody. We could say, let's talk about it later. We could say, hire somebody, but not the person that we just heard from. We could say, hire the person we just heard from. So what's the sense of the room in terms of what they want to do for the ends policy consultant? And I think, were you gonna abstain, Michelle?
I don't wanna talk money, which means I'll probably scope things, that's why I asked the question to the whole board about the number, right? Like, I'm not trying to, this is about presenting what is best for us. So the only other thing I wanted to add is that, I did contact two others. One is another small women-owned consultancy, and the other is a larger organization called EdFirst. And neither of them are taking on new work at this time. I have a list of maybe 6 or 7 more between either close contacts, word, recommended by close contacts, or larger organizations. I have a feeling under our timeline, larger organizations would not be nimble enough, because in this area, when folks are working with states and districts, this is often planned out in advance. And so when they bid on work, they bid on the largest pieces they can get, first of all, and with a lot of lead time. So it doesn't surprise me that the 2 other people or 2 other entities that I've contacted said, I couldn't do this under your time.
I thought that Annie's proposal and the team looked really great. I think my only real concern was just the distance, and not because I don't think that California people can tell us what to do here in Vermont, but just simply because of the travel expenses and how that would add on to the expenses overall. But I mean, other than that, that was my only concern about it. And if you tried to speak with other entities and didn't really come up with anything else, then that makes sense.
I would really like a consultant hired. I think that would be important to form questions and focus groups, and kind of making sure that our biases and like agenda aren't within those questions and things like that. So that's why I think that a consultant is very important.
Well, I mean, it sounds like the consultant's the way to go. I always like to get, like a couple of 2 or 3 people to look at, or companies to look at. So we can because of the time crunch, that might not be possible. So your options are to go with one or change your timeline.
Looks like Monica's been volunteered to serve as the.
Hi, I'm Monica. Just to kind of build off of Michelle's comment, we do use a consultant, Great Schools Partnership, for a lot of mission and vision and more innovative directional work. They're a consultancy group based out of Maine, but they have Vermont folks that we work with. And that might be helpful too. They specialize in gathering a ton of feedback. I've worked with them in the past. Our executive director of
You're a nonprofit.
learning also has worked with them. So that may be the direction.
So one
They are
option,
currently taking contracts.
so one option we could do tonight is we could essentially ask the committee to get another bid, to try to get another bid. And then pick between the bids up to a certain dollar amount. So we would authorize the committee tonight not to hire a specific person, but just to hire somebody at a certain price. And as long as we've been able to at least request a bid from somebody else. Is that something the board would be comfortable with?
Well, not just a bid, also some type of presentation, I wouldn't want to just,
So you want to have another presentation at a board meeting, or do you want just a presentation to us?
no, what I'm saying is that we've received one presentation. You wouldn't want to just take somebody else's bid without knowing what they're about.
Right, so they would present to the committee.
Yeah, whoever.
Yeah.
But as long as, yeah, we get some kind of.
Right.
Right, to make sure we're focusing on the in-person and the diverse focus groups and the things that we really want to achieve.
Okay, so I would entertain a motion to authorize the ends policy committee to hire a ends policy consultant at a price up to $22,000 after conducting a further search for any other consultants that might be available and able to present to us and do a comparable offer to what we heard tonight.
I amend the motion. At least
Yeah.
one more consultant, like.
So you're
I feel like-
saying the motion should fail unless, or I'm sorry, we're not
Didn't
allowed.
You said that, you said more consultants, so like at least one, like one.
Oh.
Right.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm not trying to be.
No, that's good.
So are you saying that you want to make it, so I guess. Are you saying that you want to make it so that if we are not able to talk to and get at least one other bid, then we should come back to the board?
That's what it sounds like.
Is it, does the board want to be consulted again if we're not able to find another bid? Or does the board want us to be authorized to go ahead and hire the person we've already heard from?
Without. Well, if we don't want to change our timeline, or, I mean,
Yeah.
everything backs up to this strategic plan and goal. So, I mean, I feel like if the committee tries to get another bid, and I mean, and Monica's already mentioned one person who is accepting bids, so it seems like it could be a strong possibility that you would be able to get another bid, and then as the committee compare and decide.
Check with Great Schools Partnership. Essex used to work with them. They're great. So,
Okay, so I think the motion that I said failed. That's fine. And so I think, I'll do the motion again. But just to be clear, we are okay if, for example, we contact Great School Partnership, but they're not accepted, but in spite, for whatever reason, a meteorite, they're not accepting new work.
Yeah.
We're okay with, the board is okay with us nevertheless signing with a consultant. Right?
but I am. yeah.
Okay, great. All right. So I'll restate the motion.
As
So,
long as we make a good faith effort
yeah,
to
sure.
try and get at
Great work.
least one more.
There we go. There we go.
There it is.
All right.
I thought that's what you
Those are
said.
good
Right.
words.
Well, I was missing the good faith. Yeah. So I would entertain a motion to authorize the ends policy committee to hire a consultant at up to $22,000 after making a good faith effort to attempt to get at least one other bid.
Make that motion.
Dan motions,
Well, second.
Laura seconds. Any discussion? And this is an action item, so we are taking public comments.
There's nobody on.
Nobody online. Oh, except.
Hi Daisy, sorry.
Hello, I'm Daisy Brighton, I'm the director of HR. My question is, how did you come to $22,000?
So last meeting, I think we threw around some just spitball numbers like 15-20,000, and then in the 15, and then in the proposal today, there was three options. The $15,000 option did not include, it was virtual. And the $22,000 or $21,000 option was in-person, 3 focus groups, and they handled the recruitment. And I think that what we'll probably want to end up doing is us handle the recruitment, which brings down the amount of money in that bucket, but then we might want to increase the number of focus groups. So I think it'll probably end up around the upper end of the bid.
And now we've just released publicly the information about the first bid.
Yes.
Now you just shared that you're setting the limits based on the first bid. Which I don't think is appropriate.
And we've also concluded that what I've done already in terms of reaching out to others doesn't satisfy the multiple. Speaking to multiple consultants.
Yes, but we also, at the last meeting, we talked about whether or not we needed to bid this out. We don't need to bid it out, so. There was at least a discussion of how we wanted to do it. I hear you, I'm all about procurement in the right way, so.
Yes, yes. Thanks for the question.
Please, Jean Marie, if you'd like to.
$40,000 is the limit. Anything over $40,000 we are required to go out to bid.
But not for these kinds of services.
Not necessarily, yes.
Okay.
I also feel like.
We're still in discussion.
I know that we don't want to talk about exact numbers, but I feel like it is helpful to at least have an understanding, because I've never procured this kind of service before, so I don't want to, come in with an unrealistic expectation of how much we would pay for something that we really want from, the service we want, so.
So the truth is, what we're asking for is we're lowballing. Our limit is lower than what most people, well, what everybody I would contact that I know of would cost. I don't know about Bracelets. I don't know what their fees are, but now they know what we have to spend.
Yeah, right. So are we good? Any other discussion and any comments, Joe?
No, I sent the board, the 3 of you on the committee, Great Schools website, so you can check them out. And I also, just a reminder that we need a PO before we can do any work. So, as when the board decides who the vendor is going to be and the cost, you need to make sure Delina gets that information.
And I would just add one final comment that I would want the board to be as open and transparent about this process as possible, because former boards received a lot of critical feedback around funding, where did that money come from, and how much, why was that work needing to be done, not in-house, that sort of thing. So I would just encourage this to be as open and transparent as possible.
So would you have recommendations for something that we're not doing now that would constitute open and transparent?
I think your idea of requesting additional sources, give you some additional quotes, I think is a great thing. And being transparent with the community around why you want to have a consultant help you with this process.
In writing though, because we have said those things.
Yes,
We've
yes.
provided, like, we've discussed all of this
Yeah.
openly. So do we need a document that says we did this, and this?
Not necessarily, no, and I'm just trying to prevent any
It sounds like
criticism.
you're speaking as a former school board member.
No, I'm speaking as an employee who has been here long enough to hear criticism of the district office and former board members, or not board members in particular, but just the decisions made by the board. I just want you to make sure that we're really clear about all that. So I'm not saying anything specific. I don't in my mind have like a document or any like specific requirements. I just want us to be really open and transparent, so that when you decide that this is a $30,000 project and not a $15,000 project, that the world, the SB community, knows why we went down that path. And that may be, go back and listen to the recorded meetings. That may be something that you put on the website. It may be something that's included, like particularly in the minutes. So I just wanted to put that out there.
I started thinking.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, well, all those in favor, say aye.
I,
So the motion passes. Thank you all. The next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. So, I think, let's see, how many different actions do we have to take here? One action to approve the minutes and the accounts payables and the payroll warrant. One action to approve the AP voucher checks. And another action to approve the boiler replacement and the snow removal. Do we need one action for the?
I would do one action for that, yeah.
Okay, so it's actually four actions. It's the minutes, the accounts payables, the payroll warrant, the hires, the resignations. That's all consent. So are there any objections to the minutes of March 18th, 2026? Are there any objections to the accounts payables, the payroll warrant?
I've got two questions on accounts payable. One is on 1436. There were three separate line items, different amounts for the same, all on dental insurance for the same month. And I was just wondering why it was broken down into three separate line items for the same thing in the same month.
I don't know the answer to that, but Dan, I'm sorry. I can find it.
Back. The other one is on 1438. The Green Mountain Power has estimates for each of the schools. Are they actual estimates or is that the bill?
I will have to find the answer to that for you. I don't want to answer.
So here comes the big one. When I looked at them, Orchard was 7,500, Marquette 7,400, Chamberlain 11,003. I was wondering why one elementary school, is that elementary school that much bigger that it consumes that much more electricity? Or are we doing something wrong at that elementary school?
We did just, emergency replace the water heater there, so I don't know if that had impact.
But this just says for the electric
Yeah,
estimate of electricity.
yeah, I don't know, I'd have to look into that and look at other bills to be able to give you a better answer to that one, so. I don't know the answer to that one.
Okay, yeah, if you could.
If
Please.
I'm always happy to answer these and happy to answer them. If
I
I have
should've-
them, if you
yeah.
have them before the
Okay.
meeting, because I have a little
Sorry.
bit of time, happy to, if you want to email them directly, or if any of you do, just so that I can answer them here in the moment for you. And
No,
I'm thankful for your questions and that you're looking through them for sure.
And
so.
I wasn't trying to put you on the spot.
No, no,
I just know that for stuff like this,
it's me.
yeah, and, I'm happy to wait for the reply.
Yeah, perfect.
It was just, if we could, I mean, if the school's that much bigger, which I don't think it is, I could understand it, but it just, that's a pretty big disparity for.
Mhm.
It could be an efficiency thing, it
Right.
could be
Yeah.
a school thing, it could be lots of things.
Yeah.
Check the meter readings and see what, how much the usage is.
Again, I don't know, I haven't looked at them or have the brain capacity to remember their usage over month over month to know if that was an exponentially different month, so I'd have to look at them and give you some feedback there. Yeah, for sure.
So,
Thanks, okay. Anything else? Okay, so hearing none, the consent agenda passes and now we'll move on to the individual items. So, first of all, I would entertain a motion to approve the AP voucher checks to Burlington School District in the amount of $118,538.76 and Vermont Mechanical in the amount of $115,564.48. Emily moves.
I second.
Laura seconds. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. The motion passes. The next item, this is the boiler replacement at Orchard School. So I will just pull that up here. So. That's pretty cool, right? That Vermont Mechanical came in under the other bidder, great.
And that's, I just would like to point out, that's a new bidder. So we've really tried to up our advertising of our RFPs. And I actually have put a request into the facilities director at the city to squeeze in on his contacts to be able to share our bids with them, with his contacts as well. I've made a little bit of headway there, but haven't, he hasn't closed the loop with me on that yet. But, I honestly have no idea where this energy efficient investment folks found our, RFP. But I do really think that, I'm glad that we advertise in the other paper. I'm, having things on our website is easy for folks to get to. I really think that the Front Porch Forum just gets such wide traction, like, I feel like that was a really good move on our part, so. So yeah, we did only get 2 bidders for this, and, Vermont Mechanical did come in, under, the new bidder. So our recommendation is that we move forward with Vermont Mechanical doing the work on this project.
Personally very thankful for all the effort we put into that. So I would entertain a motion to approve the bid recommendation for the Orchard School boiler replacement. Laura moves.
Second.
Dan seconds. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. The motion passes. And the next one is the snow removal equipment.
So I shared an updated, if you would allow me to talk.
Yeah, please.
Yeah. I shared an updated bid award letter with Seamus earlier today. So you'll see that what we're looking for is a piece of equipment to do some snow removal in-house. And right now we do some of our snow removal in-house, and some of our snow removal is done by a contractor to the district. And we've had some issues in particular at the Rick Marcotte School. It's just a really tight parking lot and property of removing the snow, where to put the snow, getting it into a safe spot. And so we would like to do that in-house. So we put this piece of equipment out with an RFP and got three companies that bid on it. You'll see that the 2 lowest bids came in from Wood CRW. The lowest one is a brand called Yanmar that my team is unfamiliar with that brand, and we're pretty hesitant to go with that. So our recommendation initially was to go with Wood CRW and the Volvo that is there for $111,000. We discovered this morning that both of the bids from Wood CRW did not include the snowplow, which is a really important part of this piece of equipment. So, because of that negates those 2 bids. Neither of those bids included what everyone else included in the bid. So that leaves us with the next bid up, which is the Bobcat. And, so that's what we would like to recommend. Is that we move forward with purchasing the Bobcat. What makes my team really happy with is that we have other Bobcat pieces of equipment here. And so by purchasing another Bobcat, we're able to use universally some of the other attachments like the forks and so forth that will be able to go onto this piece of equipment as well. Yeah, they're all interchangeable. So that's why those 2 bids were significantly lower than the others, because they weren't complete, unfortunately. Seamus and I chatted a little bit today about, we couldn't go back to this bidder and ask them to include to correct it. because we've publicized everyone's bids. So if we wanted to, we would have to scrap the whole thing and start over again. Which,
Was our proposal or whatever, the RFP,
yeah,
was it not clear enough that it should, you would think that when you're looking for snow
it's
removal.
very specific. Most of the bids are really very specific, snow removal equipment, roof, boiler, like it's really specific
Right.
about what the need is. I believe it was as accurate as it needed to be, as two different vendors were able to produce a bid that included that. I think it truly was an error on this salesperson's fault, just he forgot to include it. And unfortunately with the laws of the timeline, we're at where we're at.
Obviously, would have come in at 1:30.
Yeah, I think it's about $20,000 to add that piece of equipment to this. If we were to have allowed him to add it to his bid, I think both of those numbers would have gone up by about 20 grand, which would be right in line with the Bobcat, which I probably would have asked for permission to purchase the Bobcat because of the ability to interchange all those other attachments.
I would entertain a motion to approve the bid recommendation for snow removal equipment.
I move.
Laura moves.
For the Bobcat,
For the yes.
let's be specific.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Alyssa seconds. Any discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. The motion passes. Thank you.
Thanks, so.
So the next item on the agenda is to look at the agenda for the April 15th meeting. I will pull that up on the screen. So we have all the standard stuff. We have our first community forum on ENS policy. Looks like we have a policy on wellness first reading. We have another monitor report 2.4. And then we don't have a topic for the superintendent's report. And that's it. Any suggestions on April 15th?
I will absolutely find something to talk about, and Jen actually sent a question earlier to me about high school students and study halls and free periods and that kind of stuff, so that can be.
Do you think Jen wants to discuss it, or does she just want you to report about it?
I think that probably, my impression was she wanted a report, and then if that led to discussion, then we'd leave the discussion.
I'll ask her what
Okay.
that was about.
The other thing I would ask is that, if we could at executive session that day, I would love to have some of our safety committee members there to talk to the board about safety plans. That needs to be an executive session, so we're not disclosing it to the public.
Okay, so I believe that we need to executive session justification for public finance. So I don't know what that is, but
Yeah, we'll still do.
I think also you were gonna move the legislation. Sorry, thank you.
I think we probably need a discussion item about focus groups.
But this is also getting really long. And it's okay.
We are 15 minutes early today.
With 8:45, I'm saying it's still
It's
too long to
long,
me.
it's long,
It's too,
long.
it's, Vermont School Board says 2 hours. So,
So we can use the community forum to talk about the focus groups. So we don't need a separate item for that. Everybody.
Could I ask that child nutrition budgeting be included as a topic that I get to discuss with you.
Is there any clarification I can just put on that point, just so to remind people about what it's about? Maybe I'll ask Joe to add that.
I missed it because I was,
Child nutrition funding,
oh, yeah, okay,
I asked to have that added.
right, okay.
Be tested if we were paying attention to the audit.
Yeah, well, yeah, that was important because of what we're gonna talk about, but I was.
Just say we were gonna talk about it later.
I did, but I was disengaged because I was turning on my computer when you said it.
And then I just wanna confirm that the community forum portion is only that agenda item 3 of. Like, we're not having a community forum. During agenda item.
So
Oh.
the way we've traditionally warned it,
Just during five.
During agenda item 5.
yeah, the way we've traditionally done it is marked as a specific thing. And then we also have like this, sort special notice about community forum. We generally have like a special little box up here that says it's a special meeting. Right, great. We only have one more page of agenda items. All right, I would entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I'm gonna move to adjourn the meeting.
Laura moved.
I'll second.
Alyssa seconds, any discussion?
Don't
I
you
think
dare.
Jen has a.
Jen, usually this is where Jen pipes in, right?
Forgot to ask.
All those in favor? Adjourn, thank you.
So.